Warning: the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
Attacked, a terrible anti-Semitic attack that was committed today in the kosher shop.
The Nazis are back, only this time they're not wearing a swastika on their arms. They're wearing another symbol. They're not marching, reading Mein Kampf. They are congregating in their rat holes, reading another book. Now, I wish that the day would arrive when our Muslim-sympathizing president would get up and say the Muslim word, the Islam word, and give a speech that even the socialist president of France just gave, where he said it was an anti-Semitic attack in a kosher butcher shop, where 4 hostages were killed by the new Nazis wearing headscarves. Even the socialist president of France said the truth. But our quizzling, double-talking, abusive president doesn't even come close to the president of France. You know what happened, don't you? All you leftists, your Muslim friends, went on a rampage in Paris, and they killed leftist cartoonists. They ran into the woods. Then they took hostages. They got in a shootout with the French police, special forces. And all of the vermin were killed. They were not brought to justice so they could give a show trial and talk about Allah and their religion of peace. They were executed where they were found. Unfortunately, 4 Jews were killed because Hitler is back. And as I said at the beginning of the show, Hitler is back, only he's not marching to the Horst Wessel song. And he's not carrying Mein Kampf. No, he marches to a different drummer today. And he carries a different book than Mein Kampf. But the end result is the same. Civilization is facing throwbacks from the 9th century who have taken their religion and not hijacked it, but interpreted it literally. Let's be very clear. They haven't hijacked Islam. This is all in the book. It's in their holy book. It says if you meet an infidel, cut his throat. Read the book. Read the book, for God's sake. Stop mincing words, or we'll all die. Everyone knows this. Anyone with an IQ above 80 knows what's going on in the world. They're at the war. They're at war. It's a new crusade against the West, which I've said for 10 years now in about 5 of my books. They're in a new crusade to take over the West the way they did it originally, through murder, through hanging, through rape, through fire, through burning, through intimidation, not through the love of Jesus, not through the message of peace and love thy neighbor, but kill thy neighbor. Make thy neighbor submit to Islam. Islam means submission, Mr. Obama. I don't know how good your Arabic is. I would assume that it's good enough for you to know that the religion itself does not mean peace. It means submission. And if you doubt me, Mr. Obama, then I'll play a speech for you from one of their own, the hate preacher in England, Adam Choudhury, who says it's not about freedom and it's not about peace. It's about submission to them and their will. They don't believe in freedom. And what are we taking them in for into this country? Why are we bringing more of these throwbacks into this country? Now, if you think I'm the only one saying this, you are mistaken. In the United Kingdom, there's a conservative party led by Nigel Farage saying that multiculturalism is the biggest mistake the governments have made. So let's begin now with clip number 1 on the Savage Nation.
First thing we have to do is to recognize the mistakes of the past. Let's be absolutely frank and honest about this. We now have, within many European countries, and dare I say it, within the USA too, a 5th column. Living within our own countries, people, mercifully few in number, but people who are out to destroy, our whole civilization and our way of life.
Keep going.
Let's recognize the mistakes we've made. Uncontrolled immigration, just not knowing, in many cases, who the people were that were coming into our country. We have allowed, and I'm certainly speaking for Britain here, within our mosques, people coming in, heavily funded by some Middle Eastern states, pushing a deeply unpleasant and anti-Christian heritage culture. Here's the biggest mistake that governments have made. We have promoted multiculturalism. We have promoted division within our societies. We have said to large numbers of people, you can come here from any part of the world. Please don't bother to learn our language. Don't integrate in any way at all. You can take over whole parts of our towns and cities, and we'll say it's made us a wonderful, diverse nation. That hasn't worked.
What would you do to wake up and hear John Boehner say something like that? Now, you know John Boehner is too idiotic to even understand most of the words in those clips, 1, 2, and 3. His vocabulary has never gone past that of an average steam fitter, if that level. But can you imagine if we had an opposition party in America that said what had to be said right now to save this country? How good you'd feel? How your eyes would brighten with hope? But look what we have, a man who wears skin coloring, man tan. John Boehner puts on skin coloring and mumbles with ice cubes in his mouth. Nothing, says nothing. We don't expect this from Obama. We know he's a fellow traveler. We know that he's a member of the fifth column, if not overtly, then covertly. Why does he enable them? Why does Obama enable the Muslim terrorists at every turn by not saying Muslim, not saying Islam, not saying it at all, rarely even saying terrorism? Why does he coddle them? Why does he bring them in by the hundreds of thousands? That's a question for the opposition party to ask, not for me, Michael Savage, to be asking. What were the recent terrorist attacks by Muslims, Mr. Obama? On April 15th, 2013, the brothers Tsarnoff tried to blow up the Boston Marathon. They did it in the name of Islam. On May 22nd, 2013, Michael Adebayojo and Michael blah, 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 Blue Blow performed an Islamist rite on the streets of London by decapitating the British serviceman Lee Rugby with knives. They were Muslims. They did it in the name of Allah. A year earlier, on March 2012, Mohammed Merah was responsible for 2 attacks. He murdered 2 French commandos in Montauban for France's participation in the Afghan war, and then he killed a teacher and pupils of a Jewish school in Toulouse. He did it for Allah. On May 24th, 2014, Mehdi Namouche, 29, for the north of France, attacked the Jewish museum in Brussels and killed the Israeli couple Miriam and Emmanuel Riva, as well as a French woman and a Belgian citizen. This was despite the fact that French intelligence had been keeping an eye on this piece of garbage, this throwback, this retrograde subhuman, because of his association with groups of Islamists who fought in the Syrian war in 2013. Friday, January 9th, the Kouchi brothers were found in the U.S. on the no-fly list of Americans and foreigners who are barred from flying to the States. Why were they not put into prison in France before they did what they did, killing 12 people at the Charles Hebdo satirical magazine? Tell me why the West is so weak and stupid. The biggest threat to French free speech is not terrorism. The biggest threat to American free speech is not terrorism. It's liberals in our government and liberals in our media and liberals in our midst who are the enemies within. I'm going back to Unprotected Talk for a couple of reasons today. I suspect you're going to want to talk about the terror attack by Muslim terrorists and the cover-up by the useless cowards in the media. And our freedoms are under assault, make no mistake about it. The very core of liberalism is the word liberal, liberation, freedom. And yet, isn't it ironic that the liberals won't say what needs to be said to protect the core of their own ideology? They would rather capitulate and walk on all four rather than stand up and say, we are free people. We will not kowtow to a group of retrograde throwbacks. Have you heard that yet from CNN? I haven't heard it even on Fox. They wouldn't even say kosher butcher store this morning. Fox News wouldn't even say Jewish. Fox News is 18% owned by Prince Alawi, I believe. And there's a definite cordon sanitaire around the Muslim word. That's why Martha Washington doesn't impress me too much on Fox News. That's why none of the leg crosses impress me too much. They're all marionettes of the prince who owns 18% of Fox News. And now you understand the rest of the story, which is why I, Michael Savage, the independent, has never been permitted on Fox News since he took over that network. Let's go to the first caller, line one. City, topic, name. Go ahead, please.
Washington, WMAL. Martin is the name. Your second hour yesterday was your finest hour, and perhaps the finest hour ever given on talk radio. In fighting your own battle, you also struck a blow for all of us.
You're talking about my freedom of speech award to the Cambridge Union that was not permitted to be given. After I had been banned in England, they invited me to speak. Then the government told them they couldn't invite me. That one. I don't know what we played in the second hour, but I'd like to get it up on my website. If someone can remember what it is we'll get it up for you. I don't know what it was exactly. Was it the speech that I was going to give? Is that it?
Well, yes, the speech you were going to give and your remarks before and after.
I know that a lot of people who have listened to me for years were moved by that hour. And I know that a lot of new listeners couldn't understand the level of intensity and articulateness that they heard in that show yesterday. It's a show to be remembered. And, of course, no one in the media made any note of it when I said I'm the only member of the American media banned from entering Britain. Not one of the left-wing operatives, even on Fox News, would even comment on that. So it's painful to work alone. It's painful to be ostracized because I'm a truth teller and I speak truth to power. But the fact of the matter is, I do it anyway. I want to thank you for listening on MAL, where the show is booming. By the way, I got to tell you something. Someone's listening on WMAL because the last we checked, I had the largest ratings of any day part show in talk radio on WMAL. And I emphasize day part. We don't count shows that occur at night. They're for a whole different audience. Night shows are a total different story. Most normal people turn their radios off at 6 o'clock and do normal things.
France is our oldest ally. I want the people of France to know that the United States stands with you today, stands with you tomorrow. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families who've been directly impacted. We grieve with you. We fight alongside you to uphold our values.
What are they,
values that we share.
What are those?
Universal values.
What are they, Mr. Obama?
That bind us together as friends and as allies.
This is the President of the United States giving a useless speech that a librarian at Harvard would give about the same speech. We're living in a time of lunacy. We're at war. They're at war with us. And we have spineless Neville Chamberlains running our country at every level. Both parties now. Not just Obama. Look at Boehner, the drunk. Mantan Boehner. What did he have to say about the terror attacks? Nothing. Mumbled with ice cubes in his mouth. Now compare that speech again to a real leader. The leader of the far-right UKIP party in the United Kingdom that just might save England from the disaster of multiculturalism, from the flood of Muslims that have taken over England, where Muhammad is the number one name amongst babies. They just might save that country in time. 5 more years of Obama's policies, and there is no America anymore. There's nothing left. They will eliminate our borders, language, and culture. And we will be overrun to the point where we can no longer defend ourselves. Listen to clip 3 again. You'll hear leadership.
Here's the biggest mistake that governments have made. We have promoted multiculturalism. We have promoted division within our societies. We have said to large numbers of people, you can come here from any part of the world. Please don't bother to learn our language. Don't integrate in any way at all. You can take over whole parts of our towns and cities, and we'll say it's made us a wonderful, diverse nation. That hasn't worked.
Well, no one can argue with that, except those who want to destroy America, those who want to see women wearing veils and not driving cars, those who want to see women forced to have clitorectomies, those who want to see schools closed down that teach Western values. I can go down the list. But anyone who studied the war that we are engaged in knows that every word I've just stated is a word of truth. Britain's MI5 chief gave a rare speech yesterday. He rarely is seen at all. Director General Parker said in a rare public speech at MI5 headquarters in London that al-Qaeda in Syria is planning massive attacks on Western targets. And they don't just mean France, they don't mean England, they mean your country as well. The head of Britain's MI5 security service said on Thursday that they intend to inflict mass casualties on us against transport systems or iconic targets. He warned a strike on the United Kingdom and Western nations was highly likely. He said a group of core al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria is planning mass casualty attacks against the West. Now, you better take his word seriously. He is not John McCain. He's the head of one of the best intelligence services in the world. His last public speech was in October 2013, is rarely seen. And in the speech, which was planned before the killings in Paris, General Parker said seasoned al-Qaeda militants in Syria aim to cause large-scale loss of life, often by attacking transport systems or iconic targets in our nation. Well, you know, you can put two and two together, or you can put two and two together and come up with seven if you want to be a liberal with your head in the sand. The fact of the matter is that these guys who did this in France were on a watch list. They had been arrested. They had been released. Why were they not executed? Well, there's no death penalty. Don't you think there should be a death penalty for any terrorist? Why has Obama kept Major Nidal Hassan, the man who killed 13 in cold blood and wounded 35 at Fort Hood? Why is he still living? Why has Obama prohibited the Army from executing Major Nidal Hassan? Ask yourself why. Is he a fellow traveler? Ask yourself the question. Don't get mad at me. We have breaking news on the Savage Nation, and this is good news for the good guys and bad news for the retrograde throwbacks who would like to drag us into the 9th century. Radical cleric Abu Hamza, that's the one-eyed or one-armed piece of garbage, has been given life in prison by a U.S. court. Radical Muslim hater Abu Hamza al-Masri has been sentenced to life in prison by a court in New York for supporting terrorism. He was convicted in May of multiple charges, including hostage-taking and plotting to set up a terrorism training camp in the United States. His trial followed a lengthy extradition process from the UK. Now listen to this. During the sentencing, his liberal lawyers asked the judge to take into account his missing hands and eye. They also argued that a plan to imprison this piece of garbage in Colorado's Supermax federal prison would violate assurances that the U.S. made to judges in London to secure his 2012 extradition. But prosecutors argued today, Friday, that the U.S. government had never made such a promise to the U.K., and life in prison for this throwback was the only appropriate sentence. Judge Catherine Forrest called Abu Hamza's actions barbaric and misguided and said she was sentencing him to life in prison because she could not think of a time when it would be safe to release him. She added she would leave it to the U.S. prison officials where he would spend his imprisonment. So let's say that's score one for us and score zero for the throwbacks. And now let's go back to regular programming. One of the fellow travelers, in my opinion, is Zbigniew Brzezinski, a man who has been out to decimate America with his liberalism. He's a good friend of George Soros. He's part and parcel of the cabal that has busted our borders, bastardized our language, and stepped on our culture, in my estimation. Here is Zbigniew Brzezinski on the retroviral network, MSNBC, in clips 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Some of the cartoons were absolutely appallingly vulgar and directed at the Prophet himself. Now, is that really humor, or is that an insult designed to provoke? Some of you referred again to jihadist groups, jihadist terror, and so forth. Jihad means holy war. We are advertising them and reinforcing them in their beliefs when we talk like that. The real Muslims are not waging a holy war against us, at least not yet. But the objective of the fanatics is to turn the entire Muslim world against us. And we have to be clever and try to avoid that while opposing these extremists, these fanatics, who do not, as of now, even come close to representing the world of Islam.
Really? Well, they say they are representing the world of Islam, Mr. Small-New Brzezinski. Mr. Small-New Brzezinski, ask them whether they are representing the world of Islam. We don't trust your fork-tongued Small-New Brzezinski because your message is very old. We had fellow travelers in the 1930s who apologized for Hitler. Mr. Small-New. Welcome to hour number 2 of the one and only Savage Nation. Now, what can I say that I haven't already said over the last 3 days since the Muslims have gone on the warpath, this time in France? Now, I realize I shouldn't say Muslims. We should use code words, terrorists, gunmen. Let's see what other words Anderson Cooper is allowed to use and Bill O'Reilly. What other words are O'Reilly allowed to use? I think they can say gunmen, What other words are they allowed to use, right, Robert? Attacker. They can't even say terrorist on Fox News. Certainly not on Jeff Zucker's CNN or Bill Griffin's MSNBC. They have to use phrases such as gunmen. Oh, alleged gunmen. Right, Jim. Sorry, alleged gunmen. With grievances. They had grievances. Then immediately pull out the apologists with the grievances that the gunmen had, such as unemployment, a lack of tolerance in Europe for their terrorist ways, misunderstood, youth, like the people in Ferguson or in New York City, the ones who continue to cause the ruckus. They're just misunderstood youth with real grievances against the police. Now, I want to take you back in time. Suddenly it's 1936, 37, 38, and we're going to be in New York City together. And in Madison Square Garden on the stage, there's an American flag, and in the middle is a picture of George Washington. Picture it. And there's an American flag on one side and a Nazi flag on the other. And in the audience are American Nazis. And the speakers are American Nazis talking about the wonders of Adolf Hitler and how going to war against the Nazis as they were taking over one country after another would be a violation of international law, and that the German people are behind the Nazis 100%, and that they're just taking back land that was due to the German people, and that they love America and they love the American way. And they were called the German-American Bund, B-U-N-D. I remember finding this in a box of magazines when I was cleaning out some store stuff my father had. I go through the books and the magazines, which he threw out because they couldn't sell them in those days. And I was shocked as a young boy, way back in the 50s, to find that magazine cover. I think it was Life magazine, because I didn't know that Nazis were allowed to display themselves in America in the 30s. I had no idea. But then as I grew up, I came to learn what a liberal democracy is and how wonderful it is, how it permits Nazis, Muslim terrorists to march around and espouse their hatred. And then I realized that there were fellow travelers even then justifying the Nazis' moves, saying that they did need the land for living space. They needed to take over Poland because Poland really didn't know how to govern itself, and it was for the betterment of the Polish people, and on and on. And so there's really nothing new under the sun. We right now have a fifth column in America, as exemplified primarily, not solely, by CNN run by Jeff Zucker and by MSNBC run by Phil Griffin. They fundamentally are the fifth column by permitting and giving a forum to America's terrorist operatives and their front groups, in my opinion. So what are we to do about this? Well, first you have to out them for who they are. First you have to call it like it is. First you have to start saying it like it is. You have to say Phil Griffin is a retrovirus for permitting this to go on MSNBC, and he should be fired. Then you have to say Jeff Zucker is part of the retrovirus. He needs to be fired to permit CNN to become a legitimate news organization again. If you say it, it will happen. Their ratings alone should have done it a long time ago, but that doesn't seem to reach the stockholders. And now we come to today's news. The war zone in Paris. You know what happened. Terror. Muslim terror. Islamist terror. Islamic terror. It's clearly what it is. These pieces of garbage, these animals who were killed today, were known to the French. They were released from prison to go and do their dirty work. They should have been executed. But because France does not have the death penalty, and because France is run by socialist liberals, as is America, they were released in the street to plot and to kill again. Now, what will happen next is interesting. They were trained in Yemen. A member of the Yemen branch says the group directed a French attack, came out of Yemen. So what do you think is going to happen next? Well, I have some information from someone who claims to know, whose name I cannot give you, who says he knows people high in the intelligence community. I have to find it from this morning. And here it is. It's from the morning. One, he says, Michael Savage, the NSA is going back through all that illegal listening they did, and there's a quote mark around illegal, to find out who else these dead bastards called on their cell phones. Two, France, yes, France, is preparing to bomb Yemen. They have to. Three, the Brits don't know what to do. You might even get bumped lower on the no-enter list. And four, the New York Police Department will resume watching mosques over the objections of Comrade de Bloodio. So I said, how do you know this? I mean, how do you know the NSA and the France and the NYPD? And he said, in his next email, I said, who knows this? And he said, and no one will eat kosher food in solidarity with the Jewish victims in Paris. So I then sent him a reply to that, which was hashtag we are all corned beef. And he sent back a note saying, I love it. See, I don't see hashtags we are all corned beef, or hashtag we are all blintzes, or hashtag we are all knishes now. And he said, Michael, I love it. He said, I was talking to a pal who was with the State Department. He said the NSA review of phone messages began when the names of these animals were found out yesterday. He said that he's heard the French are already planning their bombing mission against Yemen. So let's see what happens and see if that's accurate. I pray to God we get the nerve to act like a sovereign nation and finally hit them where they live. You know, there's an old adage from George Orwell, which I've never forgotten. If a man comes to put a bomb in your mother's house, put one in his mother's house first. Instead, we have Brzezinski, Zbigniew Smolinski, having the audacity to say that we shouldn't even publish cartoons because it's offensive to some of these retrogrades. In other words, let's get rid of the First Amendment because it may offend these retrogrades. Well, you know, it also offends them, Mr. Smolinski. Mr. Smolinski, they don't like women driving cars either. You know, and maybe women shouldn't be permitted to drive cars in the West because it's offensive to some of the veiled folks walking around amongst us. I can go down the list, but it might get too vulgar for you, Mr. Smolinski. It now is open mic, meaning unprotected talk on the Savage Nation. And that goes back to the programming I introduced 2 weeks ago, which is taking the talk landscape by storm. This is a little different than those who say they have, open mic Friday. No, this is much different than that. It may be open mic, but they see your name, your city, and what you're going to say up on their boards, and they're carefully screened on the open mic. I did that for many years. This is something new. This is unprotected talk where I don't see your name, I don't see your city, and I don't see your topic. So I go into your calls blind, which means I can take opposition callers, and we can have a real discussion on any topic. So I have to be on my toes, and I am. And now let's go to line number 8. Go ahead, you're up on the Savage Nation.
Lawrence, WABC New York, sir.
What's your first name?
Lawrence.
All right, Lawrence, fire away. Topic.
All right, here. The fifth column is Barack Hussein Obama. He is a Muslim. He's a Muslim Brotherhood plant. I've mentioned this on your show many times before. I called him a hologram. He's not a hologram. He's very visual as to who he is. He is in...
No, I called him a hologram. You didn't call him a hologram. I named him a hologram.
Okay. But nonetheless, he is in support of Islam. Islam will be, according to the Book of Revelations. And by the way, sir, you are a prophet of God, as I have been myself, for telling the truth about what's going on in the country.
Wait, please, don't include me in your psychosis. I'm not a prophet of God. I'm one American with a lot of education. I've read widely. I have a very good analytical mind, and I would not say that's prophetic. But if you want to walk in the shoes of Jesus and consider yourself a disciple, go ahead. What else do you have to say right now?
The spirit of the truth is within you, sir, and you...
Yeah, I understand. I do have the spirit of God within me, but so do all people of conscience.
Exactly, yes.
All right, all people of conscience means what? What does the word conscience mean? Well, you could say it means with science, but it doesn't mean with science. It's with consciousness. It is with consciousness. I would say that any conscious human being has the spirit of God in them.
It's the opposite of demonic possession, which is taking place all over the world.
Yes. Oh, it's awful. We live in a debased society where there is no honor whatsoever. In fact, I have a story that I printed up on that exemplifies that. If I can put my hands on it, I consider myself a real prophet. I have too many articles to even find it. I can remember it, though. The article appeared this morning, and it was that a group of students in an ethics class at Dartmouth College, a former Ivy League school, now nothing but an institution of lower learning, Dartmouth in New Hampshire, Ivy League. What that means today, you have anyone's guess what Ivy League, you send your child to an Ivy League, they come back a degenerate, psychotic, America-hating, family-hating, business-hating loser. So the losers at Dartmouth were forced to take an ethics class, and they were found to have been cheating in an ethics class. And most of them, by the way, were athletes forced to take an ethics class. But it gets even better than that. The classes at Dartmouth now have a system of test taking that is electronic, meaning they don't even write anything anymore, because that would rule out some of the multicultural students who can't write their own names in English, who now want an Ivy League education so they can go to work for the Gap as an assistant CEO on the day of their graduation. So they don't even give them a written test anymore. It's now electronic. And they were passing the electronic test. It's a clicker they use. Can you imagine they give them a clicker to use? And these athletes at Dartmouth were passing the clickers from one athlete to another. This is your Ivy League school today. Now, look, this is unprotected talk. We don't have to talk only about the Muslim terrorism in Paris and the frankly sad outcome, which is the death of 4 hostages, mainly 4 Jews. Once again, Jewish blood has been spilled, this time not by the Nazis. This time, Hitler is wearing a headscarf. Well, the siege in the kosher market is over. Unfortunately, 4 Jewish people were killed by the vermin. And the vermin who killed them was killed as he knelt to make his afternoon prayers to Allah. And as he bent over on his prayer rug, the police barged in and shot the man. I guess that's a hate crime. I suspect that the police will be brought. If it was in America, I think Eric Holder would consider bringing a hate crime against the special forces for shooting a Muslim during a prayer. I mean, there should have been a timeout, right? It doesn't matter that he killed 4 people before that or would kill 4 million after that. He was praying. He was practicing his religion. And as he bent over on his prayer rug to pray to Allah for good luck and good fortune in killing more innocent people, the special forces managed to close down, knock down the door and shoot him. On the run is a piece of garbage woman, a French terror woman, with pimples all over her face. I guess she was a loser to begin with, so she joined this band of scum, and she killed a policeman. And this rat woman with she's got pimples all over her face. She looks like one of these ads you see on the high channels late at night for pimple cream. But the French terror girl is on the run after killing a policeman. And they released a mugshot of the female rat woman. They don't know where she is. She's hiding, no doubt, in one of the ethnic neighborhoods of Paris, being given a veil, perhaps, to hide in. You know that veils are prohibited in France. Did you know that? As liberalist France is, they had the wisdom to ban the burqa and ban the building of minarets over mosques because it destroyed the landscape of their country. Would you believe this? This is hard to believe, that even liberal France has come to understand that their culture was being decimated by the invaders from the Middle East. Hostages killed in Paris supermarket siege. Commandos storm a supermarket in eastern Paris as a deadly siege leaves a number of hostages, meaning Jewish hostages, dead. Once again, the Jews are the canary in the coal mine in Europe. The Jews were the canary in the coal mine in World War II, and during that period, once again, the Jews are the canary in the coal mine against the new breed, which is an even more vicious breed than the Nazis. In other words, the Nazis were bad enough, but these people are worse. These people are worse because they hide behind a religion, which makes them a little less easy to kill. And the Nazis didn't hide behind a religion. They hid behind a vicious ideology, it is true, a racist ideology, but they didn't have a religion to hide behind, so people could look right at it and say what it was. But now here the liberals are, oh, it's just their religion. No, you can't say that. Nothing to do, not religion, not Muslim, not Muslim, not Muslim. Nothing to do with Islam, not Islam, not Islam. No Islam, no Islam, not realism, not Muslim, not Muslim. So now we have the apologists, the fifth column here in America, operating in overdrive because of Jeff Zucker and the one who runs MSNBC, Phil Griffin. So it's not a good day for America. It's not a good day for the world. The world is at war. We know who is conducting the war against our way of life. And, you know, many of us have problems with the extreme social liberalism that we live with every day. The vermin of Hollywood, for example, continue to insult the dignity of humankind in their behaviors. And I don't have to spell it out for you. And this is an affront to people, whether they're religious or not. They find it abhorrent to continuously have to read about some talentless piece of garbage with a fat behind, day and night, who makes millions of dollars a year walking around with a fat behind. No one even understands why she's a media star. So we understand we live in a debased society where someone's behind becomes more important than the writings of Schopenhauer, for example. In other words, if you have a fat behind and wear yoga pants in Hollywood, they make a movie about your life and you make millions of dollars, and no one even knows who Karl Marx or Schopenhauer was. And I'm not putting Karl Marx up on the big board, but at least he was an intellectual who could write a story. He wrote a very good story that apparently Obama took literally. Who do you blame for the meltdown of the Western ability, the ability of the West to defend itself against Muslim terrorists and the Muslim invasion? These latest attacks in France, I would blame upon extreme liberalism and those, for example, who oppose torture. Why do I say that? Because the only way you're going to get information out of these very hard men is to torture them, in plain English. I mean, I'm sorry you don't want to hear it. It's very impolite. I understand that. But unless you use the most extreme methods of breaking them, you're not going to learn where the bombs are. Everyone in the business knows that. And they were doing it in third world countries where there were not people like Dianne Feinstein looking over their shoulder. If they caught a terrorist, they take him to Jordan where they don't follow such rules. And they use any means necessary to break them and get information to stop the next terror attack, which could kill you, for example, in your supermarket or your child's school or your subway or your airplane. Now, I blame Dianne Feinstein in part for the Paris massacre. Do you understand why? There's a lot to be said and a lot of blame to go around for the worst terrorist attack in France in the last 20 years. The fact of the matter is Muslim terrorism is nothing new. They've been at war with the West, or the whole world for that matter, for 1,000 years, only now they're better organized and better financed than ever. Unfortunately, for the safety of the West, we have nothing but cowards, liars, and grifters running our nations. And one of the main enemies is Dianne Feinstein. Why do I say that? I don't know the fine lady. I know she's a fine woman who thinks only of the safety of America and Americans. But by attacking the CIA as she did before Christmas, when she leaked the so-called torture report, what she did was intimidate our spy agencies from doing their jobs. How do we know that some of our operatives in some of the worst hellholes on earth were not about to break one of these operatives of the evildoers and get information which could have forestalled that Paris attack? We could only assume that she inhibited them from doing their job, the same way that de Blasio and Al Sharpton have intimidated the New York Police Department, which has now basically turned its back on many, many minor crimes. Arrests are down for virtually everything in New York City because of Al Sharpton and Mayor de Blasio. And so by attacking the CIA, Dianne Feinstein intimidated the CIA in plain English. By attacking the CIA and saying they were a bunch of evil torturers, she inhibited the agents in the field from doing their job. They were afraid of either being outed or, worse yet, killed as a result of Dianne Feinstein. And I have said before, and I'll repeat it again, I'm an outsider. I don't work in government. I'm simply here looking from the outside in. There should be an immediate investigation by the Republican Party of the damage that Feinstein's leak did to the CIA's ability to gather intelligence information. It's that simple. She should be called on the carpet and forced to explain what her real intent was and why she did it before Christmas. One man's opinion. Now, we've had several people call the Savage Nation today and say that Islam uses deception as their warfare. And they trick us into believing that they stand for peace when, in fact, they have other agendas. And that many of them act as normal members of Western society, but they're waiting to attack us. Now, there's an article just came out that confirms this. Here's the headline on Fox News. If you want to consider it invalid, go ahead at your own risk. Al-Qaeda turncoat who helped U.S. nail al-Awlaki warns of more sleeper cells. He's a former motorcycle gang member from Denmark who joined Al-Qaeda, and then he became a double agent. He claims to have helped the U.S. hunt down one of the terrorist organization's top leaders. He said that this week's attacks in Paris prove that sleeper cells are positioned around the West, ready to carry out fresh attacks. But he knows more about their game than you do. Morten Storm, who was an informant for Denmark's National Intelligence Agency, had first-hand dealings with Anwar al-Awlaki, while the U.S.-born Haider was head of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And he said Western countries must protect themselves by canceling the citizenships of homegrown radicals who travel to the Middle East to fight or train. No kidding. Why don't we cancel their citizenships? Moreover, why do we let them back in at all? Why do we just not let them back in? Anyway, he said once radicalized, homegrown jihadists can easily blend into society until given the signal to strike. Storm said in a conference call facilitated by the New York-based terrorism research group Clarion Project this. He said deception is their warfare. One of the things that these Muslim groups believe in is that you are allowed to trick someone into believing that you stand for something else when you really have other agendas. These Muslims will act as normal members of Western society. Storm, age 38, who co-wrote Agent Storm, My Life Inside Al-Qaeda and the CIA, speculated that the suspects who launched the bloody commando-style attack on French satire magazine newspaper Hebdo are likely among many such Islamist terrorists in position and ready to carry out attacks in Europe. And, of course, it was confirmed today that it came from Yemen. And they were living in France. They had been arrested in France, but the French, because of ultra-liberalism and ultra-tolerance, the French permitted them back in, released them in the streets, and the rest is history. This guy Storm was involved with drugs and violence as a member of the motorcycle gang Banditos before going to prison in 1997. And when he was let out, he moved to England with a Danish Muslim convert he met in jail. There he embraced Islam, praying 5 times a day and growing out his beard. Storm claims that it was during this time that he came into contact with al-Qaeda members and had traveled to Yemen 3 times before he met their leader al-Awlaki in 2006. Now remember, al-Awlaki was a U.S.-born jihadist who rose through the ranks of al-Qaeda and was one of the world's most wanted terrorists before a CIA drone killed him in 2011. The very same drones, by the way, that Sheila Jackson Lee and other liberals say should be outlawed. Storm claims that he left Islam after militants rejected his offer to join their fighting ranks in Somalia. So he began working with Danish intelligence shortly thereafter and continued to be a double agent, maintaining contact with al-Qaeda. And through the Danish intelligence organization, he passed info to the CIA, which he says led to the September 30th drone strike that killed al-Awlaki. Now, we go on and we listen to more of this. He says they were extremely organized. Many of those trained were given the chance to join fighters in battle and kill government officers and Shia Muslims. He also said they had religious scholars at the facilities to enforce Sharia law, as well as informants at airports that could help pass operatives through from Yemen to Europe, blah, blah, blah. He said what they're really doing is waiting for the right moment. Then these sleeping cells, now in the West, eventually wake up and attack their targets. And the main point to remember is that some of the callers that you heard on the show today said that many of these radical Muslims are using deception before acting as terrorists, or many of the Muslims are, in fact, front groups for the terrorists. This man, Mr. Storm, who was a double agent, says deception is their warfare, is that you're allowed to trick someone into believing that you stand for something else. When you really have other agendas, they will act as normal members of Western society, and then they will strike. That's Morten Storm, and the article just came out on Fox News, and I thought it was worth sharing with you as we sit here wringing our hands, not knowing what to do next. Any sane nation knows what to do next. There are many things that can be done immediately. They should have been done yesterday. For example, anyone who travels to any of these countries and gets trained, you cancel their passport or you bring them back and put them into a life in prison without trial because they've already committed the trial. The act alone is the trial. So you make a new law which says if you travel to these countries and you train with terrorist groups, you're going to be thrown into a maximum security prison without a trial. Or you'll be sent to Guantanamo and you'll be kept there for the rest of your life without a trial. I mean, there are many things that a nation would do in a time of war, but when you have a leader who is somewhat sympathetic to their beliefs rather than their cause, it's very difficult to understand how we're ever going to defend ourselves. Line 5, topic name, city, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Paul in Fort Walton Beach, listening on WFTW. And I have a comment on something you just said, Dr. Savage. You were asking rhetorically why it is that these American citizens that go to the Middle East and receive jihadi training don't have their passports and citizenship pulled when they return. And the answer is that John Boehner wouldn't let the bills out of committee. 3 bills were submitted in June and July of last year. The one that was most co-sponsored was the one by Michelle Bachmann, whom John Boehner forced out of Congress. She had to retire after this last
right. Now, why would Boehner have rejected such a common sense law which would protect us from these turncoat Muslims?
Because he's fronting for the administration. He's the Speaker of the Uniparty. There's no longer a two-party system in this country, at the top anyway. We have...
Well, that's why I call it him President O'Boehner. You've heard me say that.
Yeah, exactly. And
yes, so we have an oligarchy. When I saw Nancy Pelosi kissing him on the cheek after he was reelected Speaker, and he looked like a happy little boy, and Mommy was saying, "You did a good job. We can now work together," I knew that the fix was in.
Well, you can go online and find all sorts of pictures of him hugging Nancy, and it's a regular come-by bunch they have up there. He was reelected on Tuesday, and Nancy Pelosi greased his skids for his reelection. She had 20 Democrats sit down and not vote. 13, granted, were at the funeral for Maria Cuomo in New York, but she let them go. 13 of them. There were another 7 that she told to sit down and didn't vote. So a total of 20 didn't vote.
Right. So it's the Nancy Pelosi party of the United States of America with Boehner as a useful pallbearer at this funeral for freedom. I thank you for noticing these things. Line number 8. Next up, name, city, topic, please. What's on your mind? Name, city, topic. Go ahead, please.
Oh.
Go. Yeah.
Tucson, Arizona. My name is Doug.
And topic.
Topic is about Sharia law. I read somewhere that Alabama put in a law in their constitution that no foreign law can be processed in their state because it violates the citizens of Alabama, I think it is. And I think all other states should follow suit to stop.
Oklahoma tried to put in such a law, but the liberals in Congress nullified that law, making America safe for these fanatics to impose their retrograde views of the world upon us. Line 1, you're next up on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my name is Joe. I'm calling from Boca Raton, Florida. And unfortunately, there's only one way we can stop these elites, and that's the real enemy. And we have to take to the streets. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop these people through the ballot box. There's no way. We can't.
Right, we had the ballot, and Boehner and McConnell took the opportunity to write in on the coattails of the conservative vote. I understand that. So, as I said before the holidays, and when I published Stop the Coming Civil War, I said our real work begins in January. I've had to put off those plans and those ideas because of this terrorism. There's no question we're going to have to confront Boehner and McConnell on a regular basis with people in the streets. They're going to have to be stopped. They're going to have to be talked to. They're going to have to be constantly told that they were not elected to do Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama's bidding.
And I hate to basically repeat what the previous caller said, and you've been saying all along, is that we have a one-party system. We have the elites running, and they are citizens of the world. They live in Malibu and Martha's Vineyard, and we're flyover country. And these people, they're what they used to call the jet set. You know, they're not patriots, not Americans. This is a convenient real estate for doing commerce. You know what?
You are talking to the converted. In fact, I'm certainly in agreement with you on that point. One last call at this section. It's Unprotected Talk on the Savage Nation. Line 5, you're up. What's on your mind today?
I'm Ron. My station's WBOB in Jacksonville, Florida. And I wanted to say that not only do we have a problem with radical Islam, we have a problem with radical liberals who blame Jews for everything that the radical Islamics are doing. I mean,
well, there's one, I hate to say silver lining in this latest Paris attack, which is that they didn't blame Israel this time. Phil Griffin and the crowd at MSNBC did not once blame Israel for the Paris attack for the first time in a very long time. And Jeff Zucker did not let anyone on CNN blame Israel for this attack. To their credit, they understood this attack was because of a cartoon that insulted their religious figure. not Israel. And so the world finally came to understand how fanatical these people are, and that it really never was about Israel. It never was about Zionism. It never was about the Jews, because if you look in the Philippines, you will see that Muslims have been at war with the Catholics there for a very long time. If you look in India, you will see that Muslims have been killing Hindus for a very long time. Wherever you look on the earth, you will see Muslims at war with their neighbors. It has nothing to do with Israel. The Jews simply became a convenient target, which, of course, was a delicious, delicious viewpoint that was picked up by the MSNBC anti-American, anti-Semitic crowd. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Unprotected Talk on the Savage Nation. As we come to the end of the program, I have time for a couple of calls, but I kind of would rather wrap up my feelings, my observations today. We're living in very dangerous times, and certainly we know the threat from the Muslim extremists. That's clear as a bell. It has been for many years to those of us who have studied the Crusades, which were initiated by Muslims trying to dominate the Christian world. Of course, you learned in school that the Christian crusaders were the villains and that the poor Muslims were only defending themselves. But the Christian crusades, per se, were counter-crusades against the Muslim invasions. You don't know any of that. I don't blame you. The educational system is completely warped. When I look back on my body of work from the 90s till now, from 94 when I began a radio to now, and I look at my articles, my books, all of this tells me that our entire problem as a nation can be wrapped up because of the immigration problem. It goes all the way back to the open borders that were established primarily by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was the first of the extremists who broke our borders with Mexico. He was the one who talked about open borders. He was the one who put in place the highways for Mexico. He was the one who talked about multiculturalism. And so all of our problems, in my opinion, relate to this open immigration policy, the porous borders policy. This is why America's culture has been decimated. This is why our language has been bastardized. This is why our culture has been trampled. It is because of multiculturalism, which is directly related to uninhibited mass migration. Can anyone listening to this show tell me that multiculturalism has been a success? Can anyone listening to this program truly in their hearts, never mind calling a show or saying what you say to your stoned friends or your elite liberal friends, honestly tell me that this is a better country because of the massive numbers of immigrants that have been allowed to pour over the borders, who do not speak English, do not want to learn English, do not love America, do not want to learn to love America, do not salute our flag, but salute the flags of their homeland? Can anyone listening to this broadcast on the Savage Nation tell me that uncontrolled immigration has not destroyed this nation? I think that if you analyze what I'm saying to you, you'll see that the fifth column, living within our own nation, consists largely amongst multiculturalists in the Democrat and Republican parties. And they are the problem, not the solution. And unless we get control of this fifth column, this nation and we the people are doomed. There's no way around it. There is no way around it. They have taken over whole parts of our nation where there are subpopulations that refuse to integrate into society. They worship a different God. They speak a different language. So you'll say, well, that's no different than the waves of immigrants when your grandfather came over. Well, in the large picture, that is true. But in the reality of the picture, that's not true. Because my people came here, and while they may have spoken a foreign language when they originally arrived, and perhaps worshipped in a foreign language, the word was to become American. We were all told, learn English, become an American. It's the greatest country on earth. None of us were told to put bombs in nurseries. None of us were told to cut the throats of people who were not like us. None of us were taught any of these vile things. And so there's a huge difference between I, an immigrant son, and this wave that is currently like a virus sweeping across the land. And unless we recognize the mistakes of Bill Clinton and the radical liberal left, and unless we demand that uncontrolled immigration immediately be curtailed, we will lose this nation within the next decade or two. It can be stopped. It can be turned back. You can close the borders. You can deport those who come here preaching hatred. You can make those who leave the nation and go train in these foreign lands persona non grata and prohibit them from ever returning, or upon their return, put them into a supermax prison. There are many things that must be done. Unfortunately, John Boehner is not the man to do it. And on that note, it's been a very tough week for all of us, a very rough week for all of us. And the week, fortunately, ended with the death of these throwbacks, but unfortunately with the death of 4 Jewish people who were held hostage. And once again, as in the 1930s, the Jews are the canary in the coal mine. Make no mistake about it, Hitler is back, only he doesn't speak German this time, and he doesn't have a swastika on his arm. He speaks Arabic, and he's wearing a headscarf.